Devin Gage, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for being on the show here today. Can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I own a gym, Gage Strength Training in Westchester, Pennsylvania. We're about 45 minutes outside the city of Philly. Been here going on 10 years. This fall will be 10 years. We kind of started, like, I know a lot of your listeners and a lot of people in this kind of circle, as a garage gym, kind of bare bones, and we've grown into a much bigger facility. And over the 9 years, we've really grown to a big staff. I think we've got 10 people on staff. We just hit 400 members. So we've kind of grown into a nice little, carved a nice little place out for ourselves.
You're being a little too modest here, man. The 400 members is out of control in one space, which is awesome. For everybody listening, this show will come out right about when we're taking our varsity house team to actually go visit Devin in Westchester, and watch him in his own element and coaching his own team. And I've known Devin now through we're in the same CEO mastermind ran by Vince Gabriel, and just hearing Devin talk about just leadership and developing other people and humans, and still having a great connection with his team. He just recently got back from New Orleans. Could you tell everybody, like, how did that come to be, and what was up with that?
So, probably 2 years ago, I really went all in on just bringing the whole team into all of our goals. We're an EOS company, so if you've ever read the book Traction, I know that you guys are big EOS guys.
Yep.
But really just sharing the vision for the company and bringing everybody in to what we're doing and making them feel a much bigger part of it. So it actually started right before COVID. The quarter right before COVID, we had a goal to hit 300 members, and we were kind of stuck at like 250 members for years. And it always really felt like that's just where we were going to stay. One day I kind of woke up and I felt really inspired, and I talked to my general manager, Jeff, and I was like, hey man, like, what do you think? Just like a crazy push for 300, and, got him all excited about it, kind of came in and, really rolled out this vision for the team. And it just so happens that 300 is also like the movie. So I like put on a Spartan helmet and like did this staff meeting where I was like, we're going to hit 300 members. Here's how we're going to do it. I kind of gave everybody their own project on the team. And I was like, hey, and guess what? When we hit it, I'm going to take everybody on a ski trip. Cause it was like the quarter right leading up to January. And everybody got super excited about it. Everybody like hit it out of the park with their projects. I think we hit like 320 that quarter. So we gained like plus 50 members. And
net
it was
gain.
just like, net gain. That was a net gain. Yeah. So it literally, we went to Vermont for a ski trip. One of our members let us use their house, which is a ski house in Vermont. And like 2 weeks later, COVID hit and the gym shut down. And, we had to, we slid back in memberships. But that was like, that experience, we've never grown that fast. We've never gained that many members. We never had the same, like, or before that, we had never had that type of energy among the staff. And I was like, you know what, like that's what this is about. And I kind of realized my approach to leadership changed a lot because, and I think trainers and people that run gyms will know this, when you're building culture and when you're building community in your gym, what are the types of things that you do? You create ways for them to win. You reward them, you show appreciation and get excited about their progress. And I was like, why don't we do the exact same thing with all of my staff?
Yeah.
Give them ways to win, create games out of the stuff that we were doing. Like part of this was we played a game with each other, which was like regen and new clients. Every coach that brought in a new client would score a point, and we made like a whole game out of it. So that's how it all came about. So every quarter we basically set a really big goal and created like, a trip or a big reward out of it.
That's awesome. I mean, I have two notes here that I want to touch upon. I guess one is a question specific to you is like, do you feel that when you went from 250 to 300 and then you had a net gain of 100 clients during technically a COVID year in 2021,
Yeah.
was it a limiting belief that you had, or was it a limiting belief that you think just your team had? Like what shifted? Did you wake up one day and be like, that's it, fuck it, I'm going to 300? But was it a limiting, like a self-limiting belief where you're like, hey, I'm good right here, I'm comfortable right here?
I think it was both. So the only person that really on the team that really had a grasp on, capacity and how things worked on that side was my general manager, Jeff. And he's like the technician on all that. He's the data guy. He makes all that stuff happen. So I think he was the one that was always like, I don't know how we're going to handle 300 people. I don't know how we're going to handle this. And I really was just like, you know what, fuck it. We're going to do it and we're going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I really pushed him on, hey, let's get the capacity for 300. And just kind of taking a different look at it, I think we were able to figure it out. And now we're, doing new math now, we're at a capacity for 425.
That's crazy.
And we found that that's really our upper limit. And it just had to do with like adding more small group sessions and utilizing the space a little bit better. But yeah, I think he was the one that was really like understood the capacity. And I was just like, we're gonna do it anyway. So let's figure it out.
No, that's great. I think so many people, business owners, not even just like gym owners, just small business owners, they lose sight of their team members, where it's just like, this is like hired help here to help this thing grow, and they should just love their job because they're getting a paycheck. And we as team leaders, if you like, people want to feel fulfilled in the workplace, and part of fulfillment is enjoyment. How much of your time on a weekly basis goes into ensuring that your team feels like understood and fulfilled with their work?
So, to be honest, me personally, as the I guess the head or head of the company, I really spend my time with the leadership team. So we've got our leadership team meeting, and that's the connection that we really make. But I spend a lot of my time making sure that. So let me preface this with, a story from a long time ago when I hired my first employee, Jeff. I was always obsessed with just my clients, providing the best experience and, training clients. And when I hired my first employee, I still was like all about just my clients having an amazing experience and giving them, the best results. And I went to a family Christmas party, and one of my cousins was asking me about the business. And I was really early on. It was only, 18 months in business when I was able to hire my first employee. And she was like, oh, wow. She's like, so you're a job creator. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I never thought of myself as somebody that was able to create a job. And immediately my perspective shift to my role is to create careers for my people. And I think it's like the CEO of Southwest Airlines that says like, treat your employees well and they treat your customers well. And that really became kind of my thing. So that's been my obsession over the last couple of years. I think I've instilled that in Jeff, my general manager, and he's the one that he does a stand up with every coach every week. He's running our leadership team meetings and really just doing the quarterly performance assessments. And he's kind of really taken that and run with it and making sure that everyone's happy and fulfilled in their job.
Awesome. I heard you say one time before, I think you definitely did say this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said, I want to create the best place in all of Westchester. I don't care about anywhere else, but in Westchester, if you're working for a small business, I want this to be the best small business that you could work for in Westchester. You did say that, right?
Yeah, it was funny because I go to a tax accountant, and they had a big plaque on their wall that was like, they were voted the best place to work in Westchester. And I was like, hey, Rich, like, how do you win that? And he was like, I don't know. It was just like some local newspaper thing. And I was like, that's going to be me. And
Yeah.
that has become like something I'm really passionate about, is just providing the best place to work in Westchester.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the mindset shift though. I mean, for anybody listening, it's your number. It's so ever apparent that your number one clients today are the people that work for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's so apparent. So what are some things if somebody was not doing leadership team meetings and maybe has one employee or looking to grow their team, like what are some non-negotiables that you have to do on a weekly basis in order to run and conduct a healthy, successful team?
Well, so Dan, let me ask you, so let's talk leadership. Who is the best leader that you've ever known for you personally?
Oof, that is a tough question. Oh man, I had a coach. My head coach in college was my senior year was a very good leader. He's now with the New Orleans Saints. Darren Rizzi was a natural born leader. Doesn't mean he was the most likable person, but his leadership ability has served him well. There's no doubt.
So can you pinpoint something that made you feel that way about him? What was he really good at that made him a good leader?
Even in that role, in his role, he was like one of the only head coaches I think in college that would come around and individually speak to every player throughout the context of every week. And he didn't coach any one positional group, which was also kind of rare for the level of football that I played. He wasn't a coordinator on either side. He was truly a head coach. He was a CEO of our team.
Yeah. So, and I think that probably made you feel like a more valuable or bigger part of the team, right?
Definitely.
So I think all of that, like leadership truly boils down to creating other leaders. So somebody that can make you feel like you are more valuable, right? So a good leader is somebody that everybody around them feels better because they are led by them. It's not always about they're the smartest one in the room, or they've got the best ideas, or they're, the hardest working. A lot of those are actually not good leadership capabilities. A
Mm-hmm.
good leader is somebody that makes other people feel like the smartest person in the room and
Mm-hmm.
makes other people better. Those are really what makes a good leader. So with that being said, some of the best things that you can do as a leader and in a leadership position is actually doing less. It's like
Mm-hmm.
leadership. I like to say like leadership is laziness. You essentially want to help other people come up with great ideas and help other people solve problems. And a lot of that comes down to like asking really good questions and drawing more out of people versus just talking at people.
I think in our industry, there's so many. I mean, I hate to call us meatheads, but like we all have meathead qualities in us. I mean, I'm speaking for
Yeah.
myself that it's like, lift weights, play sports, whatever it's going to be. And I think so many times is like we wear our heart on our sleeves where it's, there's a little insecurity about like being quote unquote lazy to say like, how can I step back and watch people do this work if I'm not rolling up my sleeves and doing the work with them?
Right.
And I know I see it. We've seen it. People struggle with that. They struggle with disengaging, and you don't have to, right? Like you can still coach and do what you want to do, but what kind of advice and some things, like you were the coach, right? You were a competitive athlete. Like what are some steps that you took to give yourself the self-awareness or self-assurance to make the decision that, hey, I need to separate, I need to back off, I can give people the reins to win or make some mistakes? How did you do that?
So there's a few things. So the first thing was really realizing I'm an idea guy, and I am always the one in meetings that is the first to jump on a problem, or when I speak in meetings, it is very clear that other people, I don't want to say are afraid to speak, but just kind of, a lot of the leader of of our companies, other people don't feel comfortable with confrontation or calling them out if they don't agree. So for me, I really realized the more I talked, the less everybody else had input. So that was the first thing, was really like, so there's a concept from a book called Leadership is Language, they call the total language coefficient. And it was like, if you basically recorded a meeting and counted every word or every minute that a certain person spoke, in most meetings, the leader or the head of the organization is like speaking 95% of the time, right? And something that I've learned, that I share this with my staff to really challenge them. And I was like, hey, if you guys agree with everything that I'm saying, I don't need you here. So really inviting people to disagree with me, and what they call mind for conflict. But the goal in meetings for me is to spread out that total language coefficient. And it has to start by me speaking less and doing less, and really pulling more out of people, asking for the opinions of people that wouldn't usually speak up because they might, not want to upset me or argue with me or disagree with me, or Jeff, who's also a leader in the business. But that's it. So really, keeping that in mind, going into your meetings with, I want everybody to have an equal share of voice in this meeting. And I'll tell you, one of the best tools that I've rolled out to my leadership team, and I'm rolling out with my whole staff, is an exercise called Vote Then Discuss. All right. So this is something that anybody can apply in any meeting. And it's essentially the concept of, what's the natural flow of conversation? Let's say Varsity House was going to add a program for 5-year-olds, right? And Dan, you were really excited about it. You were like, hey, my kid is 5. I'm really excited. And we're going to get 55-year-olds in here. It's going to be great. Here's how we're going to do it. Sarah, you're going to run it. Jeff, you're going to, coordinate it. And you kind of throw everything out there. And then you kind of say, all right, how does everybody feel about this? The fact that you were so excited about it and had all these ideas, you did all this work, I would be willing to bet that people were going to go along with it, even if they didn't really agree with you. So that's essentially a discuss then vote approach, right? And what happens there is the people that might not agree are not going to speak up, and that's not going to make them really happy and fulfilled in their job, because they're going to burn out, right? So if you reverse that and you do a vote then discuss, the way you would approach that conversation or that idea is, all right, guys, we're thinking about adding a 5-year-old training program with about 20 kids. Everybody take out a piece of paper. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you, or how into this idea are you, right? And keep it anonymous. You have to keep it anonymous, because if you roll this out to everybody in your organization, you're going to see how they really feel, because they don't know what to compare it to, right? And you might, Dan, so you might have a 10 and everybody else might have a 1 or a 2. And then the goal is really push on those low numbers and say, whether you want to approach it individually, like, give me a staff member's name.
Adam.
So Adam, you put a 1, let's talk about that. Right. So again, you kind of take the pressure off of how excited you are, and you can pull kind of leadership out of people and make sure that the people that are dissenting or disagreeing the most get the most out of that.
So you're turning it into almost like a negotiation of like, why is this important? Because I think sometimes too, like, I'm taking this down, like I have my team meeting tomorrow. I'm going to figure out something to vote on tomorrow, but just to try it. But I think sometimes, I know for us, we've done it in the past, and maybe we're a business that's been open for a long time, is maybe a team member sees, oh, we're adding something again. Like, what's in it for me other than just stress and more work? They'd be interested to see that.
And that's the way that the leader approaches that conversation is 100% of your leadership ability. If you can create safety in inviting them to speak out, that's what creates a good leader, because
Right.
they're going to feel heard. And again, it's all about how you approach it. And something that you want to avoid, I wrote down, there's like the sins of questions, right? So let's say you do this exercise, you're going to add a 5-year-old program, and you and Joe vote a 10 and Adam votes a 2. Don't talk about the 10s, and just say, all right, so we've got some low numbers here. Let's talk about it. Create a really safe space for them to do it. If you jump on every, well, it's going to be a lot of work. Well, you're getting paid for it, aren't you?
Right.
That's not good leadership. So I have a list of questions, and basically what I call the sins of questioning, because the questions that you ask are so crucial. I'm trying to find where I wrote these down.
How often will you use something like this, Devin? Like, you do it every team meeting or once a month, or?
So every meeting that we have problems like this, or we're discussing issues, I really try to make a point to call for a pause in the meeting, right? So anytime there's a decision being made, it's very easy for again, my brain moves really quickly, and I'm just that type of person naturally. So this is very unnatural for me. I always try to slow things down, because we'll just rattle things off, and the high performance in the meeting might just be yep, good, let's do it, decide and move forward. Where there may be other people in the meeting that aren't totally clear, or aren't totally on board, or they don't know how that affects them, or if that's going to be more work. So I always try to find a time to call for a pause in the meeting, and really just say, hey, let's really talk about this. Let's really think about this. And there's a lot of little tools and exercises that you can do. But when it comes to, so let's say you do the vote then discuss, and you've got a couple people that vote really low, right? The next thing is you got to question it. You got to find out why, and see the reason that they're not all that excited about it. So you want to avoid 5 things when you're asking questions. So the first thing is what's called question stacking. So question stacking is essentially when you just hit them with multiple questions in one sentence, where you're like, well, why don't you like that? Don't you think it's a good idea? Right? Give them time to process, and don't feel like you're bombarding them with questions.
Give them a second.
So, yeah, give them a second. Ask them one question. Never ask why questions. That's number 2. Why questions are always going to elicit a defensive response. So, well, why don't you like that? So you would want to, I like how instead of why. Tell me, how do you feel about that? How do you think this will affect your work schedule? So why questions, as a leader, you always want to avoid that why question. Another one is leading questions, right? So I think it's very easy for leaders to speak in leading questions, where, again, let's stick with that same idea about rolling out a 5-year-old thing. A leading question might look like, well, don't you think this is a good idea? Or don't you think this is going to bring in a lot more money, and people have kids that want to do it? Right? You're kind of leading them towards agreeing with you, right?
Yeah, they don't have a choice. Again,
as a leader, you've got a really influential voice, and you've got to be really careful that you don't overextend that. Another sin of questioning is what they call binary questions. Basically anything that's like a yes or no answer, because they're probably, when you push them like that, they're just going to agree with you, right? Hey, are we good to go on this? Chances are they're going to say yes, and the last one are what are called self-affirming questions. Hey, don't you see where I'm coming from? Or doesn't that make sense? Right? So again, you want to just give them a really safe space to speak, and not bombard them with questions or try to influence them or change their mind, and really just genuinely hear what they have to say.
It's like knowing the psychology of what makes people move. And the thing is what you're talking about now is it's a good reminder for us all. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I have to, we elicit, I mean, we do elicit good conversation in leadership meetings, but we don't in like town hall style meetings, which
Yeah.
is like our everybody meeting. And I have to do a better job of that personally, but it's also listening too. Like this could be for year end reviews, things like that. People will they'll open up. And if you could ask questions like this, if you could listen to people, I think that also plays to the fulfillment aspect too, because if a conversation is always one sided, it's the person is not going to feel heard. How could they be? So,
Yeah.
um,
And I think, you asked for ways to go about these leadership conversations. And the last thing that I'll share with you about my approach is what I call like leading from abundance. And to sum that up, it's essentially, it's knowing that I have the answer to the solution, which as the leader of the company, you typically always do, right? You have, you typically know what you want, the solution, that you could answer it, but having the discipline to let others speak up and figure it out for themselves. And again, that, kind of falls into like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
mm-hmm.
And the more people that are thinking independently and feeling confident to speak up, the further you're going to go as an organization. And it just requires being patient, letting people fail, and really letting them feel safe failing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of been my approach, is like knowing that
That's great.
for everything that comes up, yes, I could raise my hand and say, here's what we're going to do as a business. Everybody get on board and we're going. But I have to have the discipline to sit back and say like, well, how do we feel about this?
Yeah, it's so cool too, because I mean, obviously we're going to visit you, to really, because I want to learn from you in this capacity, because I know that we can be better, I can be better, our leadership team can be better, because they have to have these conversations with people as managers as well. And I think it's so cool that, and I want to segue to our next question for you is, how many sessions in the last, not this is a bad thing, but like how many sessions are you doing on the floor now?
Coaching?
Yeah.
Oh man, none. I mean,
And
unless
and how many members did you gain in the last calendar year?
a lot. So, I mean, in the last calendar year, we've netted 140.
Right. I mean, it's nuts. Like, so to the people that are nervous about this, and my next question is like, how has your mindset towards gym ownership shifted in the last 10 years? And what has changed? Because I know you're doing in homes, you were doing sessions in your house, you were doing morning till night, nonstop, and you reached a limit. And we've done the same thing. But obviously, you coaching your coaches and becoming a great listener, it doesn't make you quote unquote soft to hear people out, right? It doesn't make you a weak leader giving others responsibility. And as seen at Gage Strength and Conditioning, like you guys you're killing it, So how has your thought process changed on gym ownership?
So, I mean, it just like what I said with that initial story, really stepping in and owning my role as like a job creator, and thinking like, my goal is to build the best place to work and let people really, really thrive here. And I think especially in gyms, gym owners' egos can be kind of big, and they
Huge.
like being the star of the show.
Yeah.
It's definitely tough.
Yeah.
It's tough stepping off the stage and elevating somebody else. But really, like, I just looked at it like, I still have to remind myself the importance of elevating my staff into those positions and showing them how to be that person.
Yeah. So, I mean, but how has it for you in the beginning? Like, what are some of so if somebody's listening and they're doing everything and they're having trouble letting go, and they have an employee or two or three, but they don't, they're just not relinquishing responsibilities. Like, what's something that you could, advise them to do to create some separation and to gain some traction?
Got it. So I got three things that they can do. The first one is the delegate and elevate tool. It's one of my favorite things. Actually, every quarter I have a few things that it's like holding myself responsible for my own leadership, and the delegate and elevate tool is one of them. So if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to screw this up, but it's 4 quadrants, and it's things that you love and you're great at, things that you like and you're good at, things that you don't like and you're bad at, and things that you don't like and you're good at. Essentially, you want to start just putting everything that you do in your role in one of those quadrants, and just find some things that you're okay giving up. All right. So that's the first thing. Do that exercise. You should do that every single quarter, because it's typically every 90 days that more stuff gets added to your plate or things evolve a little bit. So I make a point to do it every single quarter. I'm actually going to do it this week.
That tool, Devin, sorry to interrupt you. That tool doesn't like Dan Sullivan have one of those like charts or something like, is it him that did that?
That's an EOS.
It is EOS.
EOS and Dan Sullivan are very similar.
Right.
They've all got very similar tools, but EOS has coined the frame delegate and elevate.
Okay.
There's another one by Michael Hyatt called the Freedom Compass.
Okay.
Which is very similar. But if you Google delegate and elevate, you can typically find those tools. And the next thing is, once you've learned what things you're willing to get off of your plate, learn how to properly delegate. All right. So one of the tools that I've taken is it's actually a tool from Michael Hyatt. He's a mentor, somebody that I joined their coaching program. And it's essentially like, he calls it the project vision caster. And it's, what's the project? What's the intended outcome? And just detailing every little thing that you want to have happen, and sharing that with them. So I have made the mistake hundreds of times of saying, hey, you're going to take over this project. Here's what I expect. Go do it. And it's never what you want it to be.
Yeah.
And you will always say, well, I could have done that better, so it's not even worth delegating it. When you go through the process of really writing out what's the project, what's the intended outcome, what are the steps, what is an unsuccessful outcome, what are some common mistakes, it just puts it all out there, and it creates this vision that is very easy for somebody to take on and really understand. So that's like one tool for properly learning how to delegate.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing is just, I call it just 80-20. If somebody can do it 80% as well as me, I'm willing to give it up. So coaching sessions, especially early on, I always thought I was the best coach. And I was like, well, I'm burning myself out because I'm trying to coach all this stuff. If somebody is 80% as good at me as, I'm willing to give it up. So using all those 3 tools, identifying what you're willing to give up, learning how to delegate and using kind of visioning to delegate, and then being okay with giving it up if somebody is 80% as good as you.
And the irony is, to champion that, it's funny because typically if you are that burnt out coach and you're doing a million things, like even your best effort in it, like, the person that you hire to do it, or the person that you delegate it to, they might be 80% as good as you in the first month. But I know that there's people in our business now that do things way better than Joe or I ever did, like way
Right.
better. And I think that's the mark of a great business. That's awesome, man. I mean, I took down last couple of shows, I've taken down a tremendous amount of notes, but I have like 10 things that I'm going to do. Like literally immediately. Is there any like resources, books, recommendations that you would definitely, in terms of leadership, you mentioned a couple just to land this plane on, like some resources that people could buy, could do to help them with their leadership ability?
Yeah. So my 2 favorite leadership books. The first one is called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. I would say far and away, it will completely change your view of leadership and what being a leader is. And the next one is called Leadership is Language by David Marquette. And that's another one that, again, will change the way that you view and feel about leadership.
That's awesome. Well, Devin, thank you so much for being on the show here today. For anybody that isn't following you, like how can people get in touch with you? Email, like, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, anybody who wants to email me, it's just Devin, DEVIN at GageStrengthTraining.com. I'm happy to connect with anybody that has questions or wants to.
How about social media?
Yeah, Devin Gage. I think my Instagram is like Devin Gage 1 or even just Gage Strength Training.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate this conversation, and I think it's going to be very beneficial for everybody listening. So thank you again.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you having me on.